Okay, so after all the interest in my last video about a particular mindfulness meditation session I had that really cleared some things up for me, this seems like a good idea to talk to you a little bit about my mindfulness journey, how I came to mindfulness, how I learned to meditate, and to talk for a little bit about the powerful impact this has had on my life because it changed my life. In fact, sometimes I think mindfulness might have saved my life. So I want to tell you about that. And whether you're on a mindfulness journey or you're thinking about it, I just want to offer you some encouragement because I think it's time well spent. It can have a powerful impact on your life. Now, I came to mindfulness meditation about 12 years ago. And to be quite honest, pretty much everything in my life had blown up. I had gotten out of a 15-year marriage. I had lost both parents within just over a year of each other. And a career that I had spent 15, 20 years preparing for, even gotten 3 college degrees to prepare myself for. I'd come to the harsh realization that this was not the proper path for me. It didn't feel fulfilling. I didn't feel like I was really my best self when I was doing that job. And so I was in this very dark time in my life. I was lonely. I was confused. I didn't really know what my proper path was. And I had a lot of worry about what was to come. I had a lot of worry about finances. I worried about my journey in life. Was I going to find out what my fulfilling work was going to be? Was I ever going to meet anyone again that I felt connected with? Or was I just going to grow old, lonely, and die alone? All of these existential questions were pounding down on me all at the same time. It was a really dark time. And I came across the writing of Thich Nhat Hanh, who is a very famous Buddhist monk and probably the most prolific writer and teacher of mindfulness meditation in the West. And I got interested in meditation and I decided to try it out. Now, when we're talking about meditation, what that really means for those of you who have never tried it before, the introductory point to that is where we sit quietly and we breathe and we pay attention to the breath. Now, that sounds pretty simple, doesn't it? I mean, there's one thing you do from the moment you're born till the moment you die, and that's breathe. So it ought to be a pretty easy thing to sit there and just pay attention to the breath. I still remember the first couple of times I tried. Friends, it was excruciating. 2 minutes felt like an eternity. I couldn't do it. But I had heard about all the ways that mindfulness can help you and that meditation was the way to work on that. So I kept trying. And every time I came back to it, it got easier. I could breathe a little more fully and into my body. I was able to focus my attention on that breath. And yeah, the noise of everyday life infiltrates your thoughts when you're trying to meditate. And the process is not one of having a quiet mind. It's a process of catch and release. And the better we get at catch and release, the more profound the impact of mindfulness meditation becomes. We start extending the time, and a lot of important things start to happen to us. But if you've tried and after like 10 seconds it feels like forever, that's okay. I got you because we've all been there, I promise you. Now, leading up to this time, I'd actually been kind of a high achiever in my life. I mean, I had been a tenured professor at a university. I had had a lot of really cool things happen in my career. My students were going on to do really amazing things. I mean, it was a good place to be. The problem was that I was really unaware at the time of how much anxiety was resting beneath the surface for me. Now, however we want to describe anxiety, usually at the core of anxiety is a worry about a future that hasn't happened yet or trying to know the unknowable. And when we go through those mental processes of trying to do those two things, it shows up in our emotions. It makes it hard for us to concentrate on things. It shows up in our bodies. It's just a mess all the way around. And the problem was I'd never really thought of myself as an anxious person before. I just thought I was a high achiever and I had a lot of energy. And I never really thought about it in terms of, is this really the best way? And so the problem was that I actually thought that my commitment to being 10 steps ahead on everything was a good thing. And I thought it made me good at my job. And yeah, I was aware that maybe it made the people around me a little crazy and I was sometimes hard to be around, but I wasn't too worried about that. But in the end, the real problem, besides that, was that I just was not able to be present with my students, with my partner at the time, with my life. And so I was working so hard for all these things to happen in my life and my career, and I was getting it done, but I didn't enjoy any of it. I couldn't be there with any of it because I was always in what now mode. And it just made it really impossible for me to enjoy my life and really be fully present for the people who were in my life. And so it doesn't surprise me really that eventually that failed me. Those containers failed, and I was kind of overcome with anxiety. And it sort of coincided with all these other things in my life kind of blowing up for me. Now, I want to talk for a second about some of the important things that mindfulness has taught me because they really have made a big difference in my life. I would say, on a very foundational level, mindfulness has taught me how to pay attention to what's going on in my own mind and body. Once we start trying that, it can be shocking how much is going on in there that we have no idea is going on. I think we often tend to walk around pretty disconnected from our own minds and bodies in many ways. And when we start paying attention, a lot of things start to come up for us. But we also learn how to kind of hold space for that. And maybe we become a little more tolerant of the pain of life because we can see it and we're aware of it and we learn how to hold space for that. It taught me empathy and compassion. It may sound like a funny thing for a therapist to say, but at this point in my life, 10, 12 years ago, I didn't really understand empathy or compassion. I had never been taught it as a kid, and I didn't really have any inclination to cultivate it growing up, which is too bad, but I didn't really understand empathy and compassion. The good news was that empathy and compassion are skills. And so you can get better at them, you can practice them. And I learned about them through mindfulness. So if empathy is what's it like to be you, and compassion is, among all the other things that could be contained in compassion, is being able to hold space for someone when they're at their worst. I would say that mindfulness meditation is empathy and compassion for the self. We're paying attention to what's going on in ourselves. We're focusing on that breath. When we get distracted, we return to the breath over and over and over again, catch and release. And then we learn to hold space for that. We learn to recognize when things come up for us. We learn to say, okay, I see you there. Not now. I'm breathing. And then we come back to it later on. And that empathy and compassion for the self becomes pretty important because when we learn how to do that for ourselves, then we can turn around and do that for other people. It taught me the concept of non-judgment, the idea of looking into the reality of something without attaching a value, good or bad. Now, here in the Western world, we're taught critical thinking from our earliest days in school. We're taught to put things in order and choose one thing over another. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think we have an unhealthy attachment to that process. I don't think we teach non-judgment. And so we think that judgment is all there is. And it just gets exhausting. And it leads us down these mental pathways that ultimately don't serve us very well because we think that everything has to be a certain way. And it then stops our ability to just accept those things for what they are. And we find ourselves demanding that reality be different than it is. And that usually doesn't go very well for us. Now, as I began to learn all of these things, I began to invest in myself to see what was going on in myself, to be able to see without judgment what was going on in front of me in my relationships with the people that I was being presented with. I was able to make better choices for things that were good for me, that filled my cup. I was able to invest myself when in relationships with people who were kind and caring and compassionate. And I was able to walk away from relationships that didn't feel safe or supportive to me. Those moments were hard, but it was important to be able to do for my own sense of well-being. So the more we invest in mindfulness, the more we start to become better at choosing people who are good for us, choosing situations that are healthy for us. I would say you add all that up, and it taught me how to be present in the here and now for everyone in my life, my clients, my partner, even myself. And when we learn how to be present for ourselves and others, it changes everything. We stop making demands for a reality that doesn't exist, and we learn how to invest in the reality that does exist. That's how we undermine anxiety. Now, I'm going to be honest, it didn't solve all my problems. Mindfulness and meditation do not solve all your problems. There's still pain in life. We still have disappointments. Relationships still fail. We still lose jobs or get chewed out by our boss. The life has pain in it. That's unavoidable. In mindfulness, we call that the first dart, the natural pain of life. Sometimes you get up and you accidentally hit your leg on the coffee table. And that's an example of first dart. The second dart is when we kind of dogpile onto that with judgment and demand and resentment. And the first dart, the pain of life, is unavoidable. The second dart, suffering, we choose that. And I think mindfulness and meditation help us choose that less often. It helps us create less suffering in our lives so that we can then invest in all the things that are actually a part of a reality. And we learn to tolerate the pain of life. And then we learn how to find the joy and the beauty in all of the other things that are available to us. Hey, friends, what do you think? What's been your experience with this? I'd love to hear from you. I'm so grateful that you're here. Thanks for being here. I'll see you next time. Bye now.